Welcome to the Gamers Tavern, episode 33. You know, Ross is going to talk a little bit about this on the show, but he's currently in the process of moving. He and two of our former guests, Sean Patrick Fannin and Corinne Seabolt, are all moving to Denver. And, you know, moving's not cheap, so they've actually set up a GoFundMe campaign that's got a lot of great donations from some really awesome game companies. There's reward levels all over the place. There's PDFs, convention passes, GM classes, games run by either Sean or Ross, game design workshops, and a lot more. You can find out more at GoFundMe.com/Big Denver Adventure. Once again, that's GoFundMe.com/Big Denver Adventure. Now, normally this is when I would say grab a drink from the bar and take a seat at the table in the corner. We're going to do something a little bit different now because this isn't a pre-recorded ad. I'm actually doing what's called a live read because we've redone our sponsorship with Audible. We've aired ads to them before, but this is something really, really special now. And I know there's a lot of books out there that you've been dying to read. I mean, you want to catch up on Game of Thrones now that the newest season's over. There's a Dresden Files book that just came out, so you got to catch up on that. We've got books by former guests on there. Darksiders, The Abomination Vault by Ari Marmel. The Forgotten Realms anthology, Realms of the Dead, with both Richard Baker and Bruce Cordell. And, of course, we've got Richard Lee Byers' entry in the Sundering series, The Reaver. And you can grab one of these books totally free by going to audibletrial.com/Gamers Tavern and just sign up for your 30-day free trial of Audible Gold, and you get a free ebook just for signing up. That's audible.com/Gamers Tavern. So go ahead and get a drink from the bar and take a seat at the table in the corner as we get started here at Gamers Tavern.
Hello and welcome to episode number 33 of the Gamers Tavern podcast. I'm your host, Ross Watson.
And I'm Daryl Mott Jr.
And tonight we have with us a guest who is a friend of mine, Nathan Dowdell.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
It's great to have you join us tonight, Nathan. We're going to talk tonight about killing characters. It's about character death. But before we do that, we have the thing we always do with the guest on the show, and especially a new guest like yourself. We're going to ask you about your gaming character sheet. So can you tell the listeners who you are and where they might know you from, and do it in the framework of a character sheet?
Well, I might as well start with experience. I've been gaming in various forms for most of my life. I started wargaming at the age of 7 and role-playing not that long after. Kicking it off with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which I actually, the original version, which I ended up GMing first. I've still, to this day, never actually played it.
Now, this is the one with the guy with the black and white mohawk on the cover.
This is on the version on the printing that I've got. It's a full color cover, but yeah, it's the Troll Slayer leaping towards.
No. There's the pit fighter is in color, but his mohawk is like a zebra. It's black and white.
It's been so long since I've actually seen my copy.
Okay, all right. We know what you're talking about. That's the important bit.
Yeah, it's first edition. The old out there from the 80s, I believe. Since then, I've GM'd more than I've played. There are several games out there that I've run into the ground and never actually played on the other side of the screen. So I'm a GM much more than I am a player, and that kind of grew into writing and developing from that.
The question is, Nathan, are you an elf?
I'm not. As much as I've had fondness for them over the years, I couldn't get away with the leggings.
All right. So what is the things that people might know you from that is out there in the wild of gaming?
Probably it's going to be the various Warhammer 40,000 games that I've contributed over the years. I started out with Xenos player characters in Rogue Trader, and highlights of it include the core rulebooks for Only War and Black Crusade.
If I remember correctly, you're pretty much the expert on all things 40k when it comes to orcs.
I ended up as that, yes. I'm still not entirely sure how. I've always been much more of an Eldar fan. I ended up basically taking the reins on the orcs for a few Rogue Trader books. But the nearest I got to dabbling with the Eldar was a little bit of background in Edge of the Abyss and the Dark Eldar player characters when those finally arrived.
Interesting. So if you had to say like one thing you wish you could have gotten a chance to do with the Eldar, what would it be?
I wouldn't have minded a chance to do Eldar Corsairs and Eldar Outcasts in Rogue Trader.
Oh, that would be cool.
That would have been cool, and I'm still a little bit sad I never got the opportunity.
Yeah, whose fault is that anyway? What kind of hack did they have in charge of that? So we now know what your gaming character sheet is like. Although I don't really know what level you are. I'm gonna guess probably pretty high level though. I'm gonna say probably like rank 4 or 5. Now we're gonna talk about what we've been playing lately. Why don't we start with Daryl? Daryl, what have you been playing lately?
I just moved into a new place across town. I don't know if you can hear kind of the roominess of my voice right now, but I'm kind of in an ad hoc setup right now. I haven't gotten any diffusion up, so that's why I sound a little bit roomy. I haven't had time to do a damn thing.
What about you, Nathan? What have you been playing lately?
Of late, it's been a lot of little one-shots and things like that. My work schedule became hectic for the last 6 months, and I haven't been able to get any consistent nights off that lined up with any of my normal groups. So it's been a few bits of Marvel Heroic Roleplay over, on Play by Forum, dabbling a little bit in Fate and 13th Age, and most recently a bit of playtest work for Mutant Chronicles.
Now, you're one of the developers on Mutant Chronicles, is that right?
I am, yes, yeah.
And what particular part of that are you in charge of?
They've given me piles of background to work with, updating and refresh. We're going through updating and refreshing and extrapolating a lot of the background. I've been tasked with dealing with the Brotherhood, as well as various rules that relate to them, such as the arts that, their psychic powers that they use.
Now, for people who are not really familiar with Mutant Chronicles, the Brotherhood are kind of the bad guys, aren't they?
It does depend on your perspective, but that's not one I've encountered. Brotherhood are pretty much the church militant of the setting.
Okay, I'm getting them mixed up with
the Dark Legion.
The Dark Legion, I totally am. You're right. So, no, the Brotherhood are not the bad guys. They're actually the good guys. Okay. Well, certain point of view.
Well-intentioned extremists, I believe TV shows would call them.
I always was a big fan of Cybertronic for the Mutant Chronicles.
We've got some interesting stuff going on there, but as that's not my area of expertise, and obviously, it's still in development, I will...
Oh, yeah. We know you can't talk about it. All right, so what I've been playing lately, I have also been kind of getting things together for a big change here. There's a possibility that I could be leaving Texas very soon. I really will honestly find out like this week, like what's going to happen to me in the future. It's really stressful. So there's a possibility I might be leaving Texas really soon. And on top of that, we've got a thing. Daryl and I are actually going to be at a convention this weekend called Comic Palooza in Houston, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be actually the first time Daryl and I will meet face to face, so that's kind of exciting.
Yep. And you may have heard some of the little things. I'm not sure if we're going to do a full episode or if we're going to do little vignettes that we're recording on site there, but yeah, it's the first time Ross and I are in the same physical location. I want to get as much on tape as possible.
It will be cool. In addition to that, I have been playing Arduin. Arduin Bloody Arduin is the name of the system, and Arduin, of course, is the setting. And, true to form, last game we actually had a TPK. The entire party died. Yeah, it was, it leads us right into tonight's topic, though, which is all about character death. So, another thing we like to do here on the Gamers Tavern is we like to ask for tavern tales, which are memorable stories about gaming. Now, normally we do this as like a memorable die roll, but tonight we're going to do something a little special. Nathan, we're going to ask you for a memorable player character death that happened in one of your games.
There are a few. I think everybody's got their own laundry list of characters they've slain. To be honest, I think the most memorable one is probably it wasn't quite a total party kill, but it was very, very near to it, and it was completely not my fault.
That's what we always like to hear.
This was a few editions ago. It was a Star Wars role-playing game, one of the D20 versions, because that's what I had access to at the time. Set during the dark times between the two trilogies, because I think there's a lot of potential for that era for interesting gaming. The group split almost completely down the middle as to whether or not they wanted to continue aiding the rebels or or side with the Empire. It came to blows, then it came to shots, then it came to thermal detonators. Needless to say, it wasn't their best decision to have this dispute inside the reactor.
Oh no!
And I think the only person that survived only did so because he wasn't actually present for the session.
Wow.
That I think is the most memorable one. There have been a few, big, grand, dramatic ones, but I think for sheer randomness, that one takes it.
What about you, Daryl? Do you have a memorable player character death?
One I'm kind of saving for something special. That one's my favorite one ever. But I do have a good one. That what had happened was I pulled off a little trick that I've always wanted to do as a DM, and that was having the player character mole in the party. And what it was is this guy, he and his wife, his work schedule had rearranged, and he didn't have time with his family, so he had to drop out of the session. But he came in for one last hurrah, and they were going after. I want to say it's Lissa is the niece of Count von Strahd von Zarovich in Ravenloft, and they were going up. Yeah, they were going up against her, raiding her in this little manor she had brought up, and of course the place was full of traps. And he turned on the party, started attacking them. He was the pure DPS guy at the time, so he was wailing on him until the mage managed to push him right in the way of this 3-step trap. So he ended up getting slammed with a 10-foot by 10-foot cinder block that sent him landing 30 feet below onto a set of stairs that turned into a slide that ejected him directly into a 200-foot deep hole in the ground. At the bottom of it was a anti-magic aura, and the entire walls were greased, so he starved to death.
Wow.
Hey, listen didn't screw around, man.
That's interesting. I have a story I could tell really quick. I was playing Deadlands, and I happened to be playing a character who was a gambler. And I got into we decided, the party was just sort of drifting. It was one of those times where there wasn't a lot going on. I think the GM might have taken a break or something along those lines. And I decided in character I would start, see if anybody wanted to gamble. So the guy who was playing the gunfighter says, "Oh, okay, sure, I'll gamble with you. I don't have a lot of money." And I said, "That's okay." We started playing, and I ended up taking all his money. And I said, "Well, let's do another game." And he says, "Well, I don't have anything to bet." And I'm like, "Well, you can bet your soul." Just, I don't know why I said it. I was trying to tune into that whole horror vibe, and he's he thought about it and he goes, "Okay." And that guy, and he said, "I bet my soul." And, for the two just normal guys in Deadlands, it didn't mean anything, right? We just played. We just played another hand, and I won. And that was that. And then, we went on, and then my character actually got killed. But I'm not going to dwell on how he died. I'm going to dwell on the fact that in Deadlands, when you die, you can actually come back as what's called a harrowed, which is an undead cowboy. And the way it works is you have to draw a certain card from the deck, and if you don't draw that certain card, you're just dead, right? Well, I drew a card from the deck, and I was just dead. But I looked at the GM, and I'm like, what happens if I have another soul to use? And the GM was like, "What do you mean?" And I explained that I had won a game for this other guy's soul, and he goes, "That's interesting. Sure, draw another card." And wouldn't you knew it, on the second draw, I actually became harrowed.
Nice.
Yeah, it was. That's a bizarre story, but that's how it happened. And we have a new arrival into the Gamers Tavern this evening. It's a friend of mine, Lee Langston.
Hey, Ross.
Hi, Lee. Why don't you tell our listeners about who you are and where they might know you from in terms of your gaming character sheet?
Well, my gaming character sheet would start back in 1978, which began with historical wargaming, which led to Dungeons & Dragons, and has been a constant part of my life in all forms since then.
So your character sheet, your race is also your class?
Pretty much. Gamer, it's the race and class, so yeah. But yeah, I do miniature games, board games, role-playing games. Not famous in the industry yet, although I can honestly say that I am in the Part-Time Gods book by Third Eye Games on page 196 as Lee Langston, the God of Games.
Nice.
Other than that, they may know me from Roleplay DNA. I was one of the founding members of that particular podcast and stepped down just about 6 months ago just due to time constraints and problems with real life getting in the way.
Isn't there a Savage Worlds product or two that you're also involved in?
I've done a lot of play testing, and I'm working on a project right now. The licenses are not in place yet, but as soon as I have that, I will let you know so we can talk more about it.
All right. Well, that sounds good. So tonight's topic is going to be about character death, and we just were asking our guests to give us a quick story of a memorable character death. Could you maybe give us one?
Well, I would have to say back in first edition D&D, I had a character who was one of the old school first edition bards who ended up with inflicted with lycanthropy, and that caused a mental break for him, and eventually he hung himself.
That's dark.
Yes. Yes, it was. And that was actually my very first actual character death.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe not the tone you were going for.
Well, a little, memorable, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe in the worst way, but memorable.
Yeah.
Nathan and I and Daryl and now you, we're going to talk about character death. Let's define our term a little bit more. Nathan, what's a good way to define character death in a role-playing game?
It is one of those things that does very, very, very heavily on what type of game you're playing. I mean, if it's something very old school, character death is kind of the ultimate status condition. It's the end point of the character once you hit 0 hit points. At that point, replace the character. But if you're playing something a bit more narrative, then death obviously has significantly more weight because there's a lot more built up in terms of the character's identity. Not necessarily something to be avoided more, but something to be worked around with more consideration.
Okay, that's pretty good. Lee, you've
Yes.
played a lot of games where characters can die, quote unquote, but can come back from the dead, right?
Yes, I've also done several that don't have that particular. I played a lot of games.
Yeah, but I mean, wouldn't you agree that is like a type of character death? Is one where it's really not permanent, where it's just like
Sure, character death in a setting like D&D where you can have character resurrected. It's still a character death. The LARP that I play locally, you have the ability to resurrect a certain number of times. It's not necessarily a fixed number, but it's random. So every time your character dies, there is the possibility of it being permanent. But it's the same thing with, if I remember correctly from D&D, I mean, a resurrection is not a guarantee that it'll work. So, I mean, even in those situations, a character death is not necessarily, fixable.
right, but it is not necessarily final either, and that's kind of
That is true.
The key.
That is very true.
Now, I would go so far, Nathan, maybe agree or disagree with this, but I would actually go so far as to extend that a little bit out to things like maybe Star Wars, where you can sort of come back as a Jedi spirit, or games where you can come back as a ghost, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think there is room in the definition for character death for it. It's a major transformative event. It's not necessarily the end of the character, but certainly it's the end of the character as you know it.
Well, I'm gonna kind of put a box around that and say, let's call that temporary death before we talk about some of the other types of death. Because what you were just saying there, the transformative event, I think it's a very important point. Mm-hmm. So Daryl, if you had actually recently had an experience with this, where you have a character who has a particular concept, but if that character is no longer capable of actualizing that concept, if he is somehow gone through some kind of horrible trauma, or he's gotten changed in some way where he's no longer just, that concept is just no longer possible, isn't that basically the same thing as death?
It kind of is in a way, because you're no longer playing the character the same way. And that works for systems where it's like, okay, you come back as a ghost, you come back as a Herod, you come back as something else. But it's still not quite the same thing, because it is still the same character, does have the same history as that character did before.
Right. I'm just going to say, like, I think that players, and, you know, don't hesitate to jump in here, Nathan or Lee.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to put out there that I think a lot of players, though, when they start a game, like a role-playing game, they have a concept in their mind of this character. And if something happens where that character just cannot be that concept anymore, that's basically the same as killing him. They just would rather not play him anymore. Like if I'm a swashbuckler, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say I'm a swashbuckler in Nathan's game, and I get a hand cut off. Well, I'm not really that good of a swashbuckler with one hand. You know what I mean?
Well,
it makes it a little difficult.
You could learn to use the other.
Yeah,
I have seen a similar situation than that. One of my early fantasy roleplay campaigns, the Elven Archer managed to lose one arm and get the other one broken by a mob of cultists. The character was swiftly retired after that.
Right. So I'm saying that's essentially we're essentially talking about the same thing as killing the character, even though he isn't technically dead. So I want to throw a box around this one and call it a concept death, or concept kill, if you will.
Yeah, it's entirely possible for a character to end up being retired, either due to the game itself going in a direction that the character wasn't, fit to be, put into the storyline, or, through roleplay has become obsolete for the storyline, as well as the situation where he's talking about where, you lose an arm and a hand and, well, now what are you going to do?
Well, maiming is like the most common term I've seen for that, but I've also just seen situations where your character cannot recover from that, right?
Insanity would be another.
Insanity. Sometimes it's just something so, I don't know. It's like putting Superman in an S&M club, right? Some things you just don't come back from. Right? It's just like, yeah, I don't want to play Superman after that anymore.
Well, yeah. Thanks for that image, Ross.
No, I'm pretty sure that was an episode of Smallville.
Actually, I think you're right.
Well, there was a comic book where Superman got brainwashed and did a porn.
Yeah, with Big Barda, if I remember right.
Yep.
Oh my.
Let's not talk about that though, because that's stupid.
It was.
So let's talk about the third type of character death. At least in my opinion, I think there's three types. And the third type of character death is what I like to call final death. And this is where you literally just tear up the character sheet. He is dead. There is no coming there. There's no possibility of coming back from it in any way.
This is the kind you get more in the more realistic style settings. There's no resurrection spells. Mm-hmm. There's no, if there are ghosts, they're not real people. They're more like reflections and like recordings in a way. So,
right.
Yeah, this is characters gone, not coming back.
Can you guys think of anything else I might have missed, or have anything else you want to say about those particular types of character death?
No, I would have to agree with those. They cover pretty much everything.
They do cover pretty much anything. Final death, especially, does tend to cover that kind of heroic sacrifice, the voluntary death.
That's also true.
Yeah, where the player voluntarily sacrifices the character for some reason. Whether they want to move on to something else or because it feels like a good out for the character.
Mm-hmm.
So, here's a question for our guests. How does character death either help or hinder a game's sense of fun?
Oh, that depends. If it's, I find that if it's a story-driven death that the player now anticipates based on where the storyline's going, how they feel about their character, and what they feel their character would do, compared to the, oh, I'm sorry, I just rolled a crit and you took enough damage to completely destroy you. I'm sorry. So the surprise, didn't know it was coming, versus the, wow, this would be really cool in the story.
So you're drawing a distinction between random and meaningful death.
Yes.
Okay, I think there is a distinction. That's true.
Yeah, I've actually seen some discussion on this on RPG.net recently, talking about the seemingly much more random and arbitrary death that tends to crop up in older school games. And a lot of the time, I think and I think this was the consensus that was brought forward, is that the threat of death is always significantly more important than death itself. The threat of death is your risk, it's your consequence, it's the stakes. It's the same.
I don't disagree with you. I think you're right, but I'm gonna go another step further and say I think it depends on the genre.
Obviously,
That is entirely true.
I don't think it so much depends on the genre. I think it can actually inform the genre.
Well, yeah, informs and is informed by. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why later editions of D&D, like starting with around 3rd, especially in 4th edition, a lot of people didn't see the same. Saw a lot more combat oriented. So you were more willing to get into a fight because you knew you could survive it. In earlier editions, first especially, you tried your best to avoid fights if you could in basic D&D because you were, especially low levels, you were squishy.
Yeah,
and especially if you were a wizard.
It's combat as a failure state. I think I've seen it described. Is that if you've gotten into a fight, you've messed up somewhere.
I suddenly want to get Nathan back on the show with Daryl Hardy because when Daryl Nathan's throwing around terms like failure state and status condition, and I'm like, oh man, we need to get him with Daryl Hardy because those guys they would be on a roll, wouldn't they?
I feel
by the time you hear this, our glossary will be up defining all the terms that they come up with. We've got concept death and oh god.
I feel a lack of linguistical skill at this point.
Well, Nathan is speaking the Queen's English, which is automatically better than American.
Well, it just sounds better, too, because of the accent.
As far as I can tell, I'm not the one with the accent.
Point.
Funny thing is, linguistically speaking, we're the ones without an accent. You're the ones who changed.
Okay.
In the 1800s.
Let's talk about let's actually talk about that genre convention a little bit, because specifically when it comes to D&D, I think it's really important. I mean, it's almost not D&D if there isn't some kind of way to come back from the dead, right? It's kind of a built-in thing to the game now. I mean, Order of the Stick did like a whole month's worth of, months and months worth of comics based on the idea of how there's a revolving door in heaven kind of a thing, right?
Ah, yes, Roy, when he passed away.
Yeah. And I think, that's an important reflection of, the mechanics that are really important to that particular genre of gaming.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when you've got a genre where the gods are that closely tied to the world, where they actually provide the abilities and powers of one of the primary classes, character types that you can play, resurrection becomes nothing more than another spell that can be used as a tool to make sure your heroes do the good deed, fight the good fight.
Well, but I'm just saying that, like, D&D especially on its own, like compared to, say, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is also a fantasy game. It also has guys who channel the power of the gods. But there is no coming back.
Oh no,
well,
absolutely not.
That's not true. If you are, if you're like in league with chaos, you might be able to come back, but it will never be good, right?
Yeah. But at the same time, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has always had means of mitigating that battle. You've got your fate points that you can burn in order to avoid death. So it's almost like preemptive. It's almost like preemptive resurrection.
It is, but it's not quite the same. I mean, it's from a verisimilitude point of view, there is no coming back from the dead.
Yeah, precisely.
That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
You've got your ways of avoiding reaching that state, which obviously works, which is obviously quite useful in a setting quite that deadly.
Right. So, if you have, I think the question we need to ask is, when is that kind of death that we've been talking about? When is it good and when is it bad? How does this enhance the fun and how does it take away from the fun?
I think the point where it takes away is the easiest part of that, because the point where it takes away is that you're no longer playing that character, even if it's just for a short while. The character is suddenly unavailable to you.
Well, you could say that if like you're really into your story, like maybe you're like some players I know, and you write like a 10-page backstory for your character, right? You're deeply invested in that character.
Well, even if you're playing it more as a game, and and when you replace the character, you're X number of levels behind, or you lose something when you get resurrected, or simply you're missing out on experience that you would have gotten while you were had you not been dead.
Yeah, sometimes there's a mechanical penalty. Yeah, good point.
There's that state of your character is dead, your character isn't a presence, isn't a factor in this game for this duration, and that might be indefinite. You're not playing the game anymore.
Yeah, that's bad. That's definitely bad.
So obviously, I think those sorts of games really suit quick character generation, so that even if character death's permanent, you can put together a new character to replace him very quickly.
That's true. What about when it's good? When is having that kind of risk in the game? When is that good?
When you're playing a game like Dread, that horror genre where everyone is the intensity of the storyline is that there's a good chance that some or none of you are going to make it out of this alive. And that is part of the driving story that makes everybody buy into the game.
Mm.
That's a really good point. Daryl, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, that's definitely good. Whenever it's kind of the point of the game to have that major risk factor there, that's always important to have. You want to have some consequences, but there are ways to have consequences without necessarily that consequence being, okay, this character's gone. The way I really don't like it is the way that it's been done in a lot of D&D editions, and it's one concept that I really don't like: save or die. If my character does something stupid, I get into a fight I shouldn't have got into, I should have avoided, I triggered the trap or something like that, I don't like it coming down to just one bit of bad chance. Oh, that Beholder's Ray happened to pick you. Roll a die. You rolled one bad time. This character's gone. That one's always rubbed me the wrong way.
And I can understand why that would be, but I think, to be clear, there are people who really like that. That is actually part of the enjoyment for them, is that there's always a chance that adventuring is a very dangerous occupation.
I think it's the same sort of thrill that comes with high stakes poker and things like that. You are playing. There is a risk involved in the game you're playing. There is something to lose.
Right. Have you ever run into a guy, Lee, who takes pride in telling you about all the stuff his character survived?
Yes, but I've also run into game masters who take pride in the fact that, oh man, in the last session I got my third TPK of the con, and that drives me crazy too.
Well, yeah, that's possibly a separate subject, but yeah.
Oh yeah. I know that people, when they talk about their characters, they talk about, what their characters accomplished and the things that they've been involved in. And occasionally you do have that person who comes up with, and says, oh, and I have to tell you how my character died. It was so cool. It doesn't happen always, but
Yeah. We brought up the idea that there's a difference between random death and meaningful death, right? Mm-hmm. Which, Daryl, you're clearly not a fan of the random death.
It needs to be a factor in the game.
It's the one bad chance of luck, and you're gone from. Doesn't matter how well you planned, doesn't matter how well you did anything. Just you happen to roll bad one time. That's it. That's what's always bugged me about it.
Like first edition, save versus death, which it's like, wow, that's save versus death,
or petrification or poison. I think, for me, I think, again, it comes back to the genre. If the genre of the game makes sense that random death is a thing, I'm usually okay with it. Like, if Lee were to say, hey, I'm going to run, Return of the Tomb of Horrors, yeah, I'm going to be prepared for save or die, right? You know,
And that's when you show up with 3 characters.
At least. Well, it's like the game Dungeon Crawl Classics. I mean, the way they do their opening is you start as 0 level characters. You've got 5 or 6 characters, and whichever ones survive become your first level characters from that point.
Right, and I think there's something fun about that. I think there's definitely, you know, there's no reason to say that that's not fun.
Yeah.
I guess
I enjoy it, and I think it's a really great way to introduce the system. But it's one of those systems where everyone knows going in not to become too attached to their characters.
Yeah,
you know?
It's a really bad thing to spring that kind of game on someone that isn't expecting it. If they come in with a different set of expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Nathan. So the impact is more negative if it's a surprise.
Yes.
And I think that may be what my big problem with it is I usually prefer more story-based games. I like characters with big backgrounds. I like an ongoing plot. And if you have those instant death sort of games or a lot of random death, it's not as fulfilling because you know the character could die at any point. You can't get attached to it as much. But if you're running a game that's more along the lines of getting a dungeon crawl, getting through the dungeons, the point, not necessarily any plot point or anything like that, that's a completely different story. That case, it's another challenge to overcome.
Well, I think there's no reason why they couldn't both be true. Like, there's no reason why Nathan couldn't run us through a really dangerous, randomly killing us dungeon, and we still have a great story to tell at the end. I mean, all I'm pointing out is that these are all very different ways to approach it, and you know, everything we're talking about here tonight is just our own personal approach to it. Everybody's individual group and campaign is different, and they're going to have different things to take away from it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I do a lot of superhero role play. You know, grew up teething on Champions and Marvel superheroes, the original TSR. And that's a genre where, again, death is not necessarily a permanent thing because, well, superheroes don't die. They may come back different than when they, you know, originally left the comic, but they usually come back at some point.
No, that's a really good point.
There's only 3 comic book characters that stay dead: Uncle Ben, Gwen Stacy, and Bucky. Oops.
and actually, Uncle Ben is actually not dead in one of the parallel Spider-Man strips.
Okay.
And Gwen Stacy's come back, as has Bucky.
Gwen Stacy's still alive in the Ultimate Universe. It was Peter Parker that died in that one.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, so superheroes is a genre. That's one where death really just doesn't happen. I mean, it's not even really on the table. Except as a temporary, you know, shift in costume, perhaps.
Yeah.
It happens when you want it to, when you use it as an event.
But that's not true for all superhero games either. Like, if we're going to do Watchmen, right?
Well, yeah.
Like, there's totally character death.
That is a completely separate genre than your standard 4-color, though. That is a much grittier, darker...
Yeah. I'm just saying you can say things like, well, superhero games don't have any death, but that's only true for a certain style.
Well, you can say, you know, D&D like games don't have permanent death or don't have permanent death as well, or they do have permanent death except for 4th edition. You know, it depends on how. It's just harder to kill people in one edition than it is in another, but it is possible.
If you have problems killing players in 4th edition,
killing
that's
players?
not the edition's fault. Characters.
Yeah, I was going to say, where did we just go?
Daryl, are you talking about killing players?
No, don't kill players. Killing players is bad.
Occasionally,
that's direct from the Gamer's Tavern.
Occasionally, the thought has crossed the mind, but.
Okay, well, I want to say, you know, going back to the idea of the genre, though, I mean, it's important to maintain, I think, some of the risk and some of the stakes based on the genre. If we're playing, you know, sort of happy-go-lucky, the Three Musketeers, I'm not expecting random death to be a thing. Meaningful death is something I would expect, but, you know, to be randomly killed by, you know, a guy on the side of the road, no, not so much. But if we're going to play Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, yeah, if some kid throws a rock at me, there's a chance I could get killed.
Absolutely. I mean, the genre, the actual genre of the game gives you a base idea of what's available, but the actual setting itself.
Right.
I mean, you take D&D. D&D's a much more almost 4-color version of fantasy compared to Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which is very, very grimdark. You know.
Well, I want to tell a quick story here. I was running my Shadows Angelus game for Champions with a group back in Maryland.
I so want to play in this setting now that I hear you talk about it all the time.
Well, thank you. And one of my players was Nestor, a good friend of mine, and he kind of took me aside early on, and he said, you know, I hear you're rolling all the dice in the open, and I just want you to be aware, you know, there's a chance you're going to kill one of us doing that, because you're doing a lot of damage. And I said, well, yeah, that's kind of the point of a horror game, is that there's got to be risk of just getting killed. And he says, yeah, but I don't want to, I put a lot of time and energy into this character. I love this character. I don't want him to just die on some random roll. And I said, well, I sympathize with you, but I can't, in a horror game, I can't guarantee that you will survive every encounter. So what we ended up discussing was this whole idea of the random versus meaningful death, because Nestor really, being a guy, he really wanted his character to end on something that was under his control. And he, coming from a background of playing superheroes, he was used to that. And I had to kind of talk him down from the ledge, actually, a little bit, by explaining that, for me as a GM, like when I run a horror game, part of the idea of a horror game, part of the reason why there is that emotional impact of something being creepy or scary is because it can hurt you. It can have a consequence, which could mean your character gets killed or concept killed or, any of those things we talked about.
And that's something we bring up a lot on this show is communication. If the game master is very clear about the type of game, even if you, in my opinion, you can't really assume even based on genre, because I had a DM and the guy who ran the game store I grew up in. He was an old school player, but we were playing in 3rd edition. I knew 3rd edition. I was expecting, light and fluffy combat, blah, blah. Sure, we got into a fight, but we're going to beat it. No, the guy was throwing, the reason why I brought up Beholders earlier, he was throwing them at us at 2nd fucking level.
Holy. That is,
yeah.
that is outside of the normal scope. I stopped playing Wizards for about 5 or 6 years because 2 of them in a row got killed by a fucking cat. Yep.
Well, I gotta...
The house cat is one of the most dangerous possible threats for a wizard at first level. I mean, it just depends on who gets initiative.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta tell you, I hear the frustration in Daryl's voice, and I know it's real. I know that people just don't like that. But I'm the guy that loves reading in Knights of the Dinner Table, where those guys just make like 50 characters to try to get through a particular challenge because they want to win.
And it would have been good if our expectations were on the same page. If I had known that's what was going to happen going into it, I would have approached it a completely different way instead of, coming up with, okay, this character's taking this skill because of this reason, not this character's taking this skill because we're probably going to run into this. It was just different expectations.
Yeah.
If we were both on the same page, it would have been a completely different story.
Okay, so, we've talked about making sure that expectations are really important, between, how people see their characters and what happens to them later on because of that impact. Like Nathan says, they're basically not playing the game anymore if they die. What happens if you have an RPG that just ignores character death? That is just not something that ever happens.
Trying to think of systems that's the case.
Eclipse phase.
Yeah, for example.
I've not picked up
to
a
be
red
honest,
Eclipse phase yet.
depending on how you run it, Fate can be done that way. There's no requirement that a character actually dies.
That is true, because the consequence system, yeah.
You're just taken out, and what that means depends on the situation, depends on what the group decides. Similar with the dramatic version of Cortex Plus, the version that they used for Smallville, where character death is one small sidebar, and basically saying a character doesn't die unless the player wants them to, unless the owning player agrees to it.
Right. So that's what I'm asking is what happens, how does that affect the game when if you play a game where that's the case?
In that case, the risk has to be something other than death. There still has to be some sort of risk there.
There's consequences. Death isn't the consequence, but there are others.
Yeah, any system that doesn't actually have any kind of a consequence system at all would be basically useless. I mean, you might as well sit at home and read a book at that point, because there is no risk.
Well, that's, I guess what I'm asking is, like, so give us Nathan, can you give me an example of what you would do, to make a risk?
Well, Cortex Plus Dramatic. So I've run it a few times when it came out, and I think it's a good example of that, because the game, the system's focus is on that kind of dramatic character interaction that you see on relationship-based shows. Your characters aren't driven more by their values and their beliefs and their relationships than they are by any actual abilities. I had a situation where, you go into conflict not necessarily because because of the end result, but more because of what the character wants to achieve from it, and the consequences, the in-game consequences. Stress it's got 5 types of stress: angry and scared, and injured is one of the 5, and you're taking those as you're resisting giving someone else what they want. Kind of things. The consequences are being taken out of a scene, and not necessarily killed, but being rendered unconscious, being made so angry that you storm off. It's awkward to try and describe, especially off the top of just off the top of my head.
Okay, but I think you're making a good point that there's other things you can threaten in their life, right? There's other things at stake than just whether or not you will survive.
Yes, you can always punch a superhero in the girlfriend.
Okay, can we make a T-shirt with that? Seriously, that's a great term.
I think we got our show title.
We got our show title right now: How to Punch a Superhero in the Girlfriend.
But that is actually a good point that was brought up by a blogger called Angry DM. He's kind of a friend of mine online. Gonna meet him for the first time at Gen Con. That's gonna be fun. But he ran a campaign. He is notorious for. We had Tom Lommel on a while back. He does the Dungeon Bastard, and he's the player. Dungeon Bastard is the player version of Angry DM. He is the guy who his in character anyway is to trash character sheets, and you run the game the way I want it. If you don't run your game the way I say, then you're wrong. And you're playing the game wrong. And that's his character. And so he threw everyone for a loop when he started talking about it on his blog. He started a new campaign in Pathfinder where the characters could not die. What happened was, and they didn't know why, but for some reason, when they did die, within 24 hours, they were resurrected in this cave with an ancient magic artifact. They had none of their gear and clothes. They were naked as the day they were born, but they came back every single time. So he did it as kind of an experiment to see what would happen, to see if there was a way to, A, still threaten the characters without having death hanging over them as the risk, which, if you read his blogs, he was successful in that. And B, it ended up kind of like a social experiment, because he found that in the beginning, they started to use a lot more kamikaze-like tactics. They would just throw themselves straight at stuff until they realized that, oh, wait, just because we can't die doesn't necessarily mean that's the best course of action, even if it does take out the bad guy, because we could be on the other side of the planet.
I'm going to drown you in naked. My corpses.
Pretty much. But again, you don't know when you're coming back within that day, and you're coming back in that same spot that may be a long way away from where you were. And he also really played up the story elements, which is what brought this to my mind. He played up all the people they knew in the town, the barmaid, the town guard, the sheriff, the mayor. They were real characters. So when they were doing their little thing where they would run up and, yay, attack, blah, blah, kamikaze attack, and yay, we got him, but he killed us, but we come back, and they come back to find the town was a smoking ruin, because what was there was just the scout. And it's all the people are there, their houses are ruined, and one of the NPCs had died because of their actions in disregarding death. So there were still consequences.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a friend of mine ran GURPS Riverworld for us for a short time. And of course in Riverworld, I don't know if you've ever read the books, but spoiler alert, whenever you die, the next morning you wake up on the shore of this river that encompasses the entire surface of this world. But it's not necessarily in the same spot that you died. So you may never actually see the other people that you were interacting with before. So technically it is a permanent character death in the fact that while the character's still alive, they're somewhere else on the world.
Well, I think, what we're getting around to is that, games where death is not the main risk or where death is not a factor can still be fun. They certainly can still have a consequence and they can still have a really interesting story to tell. And, I'm going to give an example that's actually a little bit outside of tabletop, but, if anybody's ever played Planescape Torment, the main character in that is called the Nameless One, and his deal is he can't be killed. But it's widely regarded as one of the best video game role-playing games ever, and the Nameless One is one of the most immersive and engrossing stories ever for that particular type of game. So it's interesting that I think that we're all talking about, like, random death can be fun and permanent death can be, a good thing if you're in the right genre. But it's also true that games where you don't necessarily die can still be, those games can still be fun. Those games can still, have a lot of value.
There's some games like that where the death is somewhat the point. Paranoia.
Well, yeah, I was going to get around to Paranoia, but actually I want to draw another quick comparison. Now, I know Lee goes to a lot of conventions. Nathan, do you go to a lot of conventions?
There aren't so many over in this country.
Do you go to Dragon Meet?
Well, it's finding the time. My work schedule's a bit bizarre, so getting the time to search them out and travel the country. Yeah, it might not seem like a long way, but it's all a matter of perspective.
Understood. Well, the key thing about a convention game is that it's a one-shot. You are sitting around a table with people playing characters that you will play once and probably never ever again.
Yeah.
And what comes to my mind is that those games are basically death-free too, because there's, if you die during that game, so what? You're never coming back. This is a one-shot, right? And a lot of people have a lot of fun at convention games. Those convention games can be incredibly fun and entertaining, even though the consequence, as defined by Nathan, where, you just don't get to play, it's just not a factor, right?
Yeah, the worst that's going to happen at that point is that you just have to wait for the start of the next slot.
Right. So, but everybody enjoys the hell out of convention games. So I think that's another, factor I would point to as that character death, while it seems like a big looming, thing that just can overshadow, your fun, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
And you guys have heard me talk about it already. I'm not a big fan of the random death thing, but one of my most fun con games ever was run by Bruce Cordell, which if you've read any of his adventures, kind of the hell that we were facing when it comes to trying to keep our characters alive. He created this, almost Tomb of Horrors-esque trap mecca. And we had to get through it, and we managed to make it all the way through the thing. He was shocked when we survived.
Yeah, and
it was still a lot of fun.
And there's a lot of accomplishment to be had. We played Temple of Elemental Evil, very old school, back in the day. And I still will tell you with pride how far Thorin Ironbeard survived through that dungeon.
Those fucking frogs right at the start.
So yeah, I think games with a high body count can be awesome too. So we've actually talked a little bit about some things that you can do to avoid death, like mechanics in games. Like Nathan brought up fate points. Now, how do fate points work to where you don't die?
Fundamentally, it's a very limited form of rewriting the story. You undo whatever it is that killed you, or change it in such a way that it doesn't kill you. Your character is left in a very bad state, but they're not dead. Essentially, it's a number of get-out-of-jail-free cards for your character to avoid those unfortunate or downright stupid situations. But you've only got a limited number of them.
This is also true for Shadowrun 4th Edition with the Edge. It's called the Hand of God, where you burn the Edge
And then you've also got systems like Savage Worlds, which have bennies. There's a lot more systems out there that have an in-game currency that allows the player to manipulate the fate of the character that are coming out more and more nowadays.
So there's one that someone mentioned to me. I didn't know if any of you guys had heard of it. It was they gave me two names. It was Corana and Roulade.
Never heard of it.
J. Arcane from the RPG Net. He's a game designer. I can't remember his real name right now. But he mentioned this one, which characters have what's called a destiny score. And the destiny score can stand in for any stat, even damage resistance ones. But if you fail, you lose a point. And your character doesn't die until you run out of, it isn't retired until you run out of destiny points. So you have to choose to use that last destiny point to re-roll something on the risk of death in that system.
Well, I want to point out something about these currency, these resources. Like, for example, in Shadowrun, it's certainly possible for me to have a character with 7 or 8 edge points. In 40K, I had a character with like 5 fate points, right? And I regard that many as being basically, I won't die. Because the odds of my character getting put in a situation where I'm gonna have to hand a god 7 times, or burn 5 fate points, that's almost impossible. That would require a campaign of very long length. As far as my experience with those kind of games are concerned, is that's essentially a character who will never die.
Obviously, Ross, you've never played with some of my players.
I'm just saying, I think it's not unreasonable to look at that as effectively an immortal type of character.
You're right in that situation, but with 40K and with Warhammer Fantasy in particular, because you've got the critical hit tables, there is still a consequence to serious injury.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if I don't die, there's still a consequence.
Yes. Yeah. And even if you lose an arm and get it replaced with even if you can replace that arm with a bionic, the character has still suffered a consequence.
And in Shadowrun, if I burn my fate points, I am becoming less effective over time. I mean, it's weird, but your edge is actually a pretty good indicator of how awesome you are in Shadowrun.
Been listening to the actual play, so yes, I would agree with that.
Oh, just wait. We haven't gotten to the Horizon part yet.
Hi, this is Nick Jaworski, and you may not realize it or probably don't care, but I edit some of the shows here on the Gamers Tavern Podcast Network. If you like podcasts but love audio editing, then I have great news for you. I have my own show titled 1 Degree of Separation, and you can listen to it right now and subscribe at onedegreewithnick.com. The show is kind of hard to describe. Each episode is basically an experiment that contains original music, stories, interviews. It's probably just best if I quickly show you some recent episodes. Try to see what you had, if you had anything interesting for me.
Have you ever waterboarded somebody?
There's actually a story of Abraham Lincoln, a very superstitious man, seeing his own doppelganger multiple times over a couple of nights. When looking in the mirror, he saw 2 faces, his normal face, and then a pale, ghostly one that worried him. I have to get back to editing right now, but you should go check out all of that and more at onedegreewithnick.com. Thanks.
So, we talked a little, I think I told my story about the Herod in Deadlands. The Herod is a really cool mechanic where in Deadlands, if your character dies, there's a chance, albeit a small one, but there's a chance he will come back as an undead, way cooler sometimes, character than you originally were.
Make a draw, pray for the Joker.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
There's also, of course, the one that Daryl mentioned was paranoia. Daryl, tell us about how paranoia deals with it.
Are you cleared for that, citizen? I'm sorry. I love paranoia. It's just so much fun. But
you and me both, Daryl. You and me both.
So I got someone for the actual play of paranoia on board then.
Oh, yes.
The way paranoia works is you start off with a 6-pack. You have 6 clones. So when one of your clones dies, and depending on edition, you may or may not keep your memories, but most people just keep the memories because it's easier. But if your clone dies, within a certain amount of time, your next clone shows up. Sometimes it'll be immediately, sometimes it'll be a couple minutes later, but you have 6 clones to go through. And your name has a little dash and a number behind it, and that's the number of the clone you are. So and Paranoia is a game, if you guys don't know about it, we've talked about it before, but it encourages sort of player versus player and betrayal. You want to betray the rest of the party before they betray you.
If you don't go through at least one clone per episode, you're not really playing it right.
If you don't go through at least one clone on the way to the objective, you're not playing it right.
If you don't go through 3 clones in the mission briefing, you fucked up.
Last time I played it, I managed to actually get my character promoted by sabotaging the mini-sub that we were in because everyone else was traitors.
Of course they were. Of course they were. But, so I think, we're exaggerating a little bit for effect, but yeah, Paranoia, it's definitely a big part of the game is this get out of death free card that you have up to 6 times.
Mm-hmm. And depending on the edition, you can actually buy another 6-pack if you have enough money.
Right. There was, of course,
or if you're a member of the Clone Rangers, in which case you can just make deals with your secret society to have spares.
Secret societies are traitorous, citizen. Please report to the nearest suicide chamber.
Yes, yes, computer.
There's also the Ghost Walk supplement for D&D, where you basically played the whole. If I remember right, you played the entire thing as a ghost.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, this is another one of those campaign things that kind of ended up getting forgotten in a way. But the way I understand it is, if your character dies, you had the option to bring them back as a ghost and keep playing that character. Same level, same class, same everything, except now you're a ghost.
And there was
part of the world.
There's a role-playing game called Rune, where you could basically do a character save. You could basically spend some XP right before you enter a dangerous encounter and then reload your character if you died. No, hey, I could actually dig it if it's, in a certain genre, I could totally dig that.
Absolutely. I mean, that just sounds awesome.
There's a campaign setting coming up for Fate that would be perfect for, where you're basically playing 8-bit computer game characters trying to save the internet from a virus.
Nice.
It's kind of it's kind of Wreck-It Ralph meets Lord of the Rings.
What is this called, and where can I buy it?
I don't think it's out yet. It's called Save Game. It's part of I think it's part of the Evil Hat's Patreon project.
Okay. We'll have to get a link on that for the show notes. And of course, there's Eclipse Phase, where your body is simply a sleeve, and your mind is in what's called a cortical stack, which is routinely backed up to a main computer, so you can just sort of, oh, well, I died, I'll just, download myself into another body and try again.
That reminds me of my Marvel superhero character that had basically an android body, and I could just modify the powers and upgrade the body and transfer my consciousness from body to body as I needed.
Or if you're playing someone like Madrox the Multiple Man, you can...
Mm-hmm.
I will drown you in my corpses is not an idle threat.
Suddenly reveal that your character's been a life model decoy all along.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doombots.
Nathan, can you explain how death works in Dungeon World?
Yeah, I actually got it works. It's kind of. Let's try and get past the blathering part.
You're doing fine.
When you reach a point where your character's dead, you make a death save. It's the same sort of test as you'd make with any other characteristic, but there's no characteristic modifiers. And like with all tests in Dungeon World, there are 3 end results: complete failure, partial success, and complete success. Complete success on a death save, you're back out, you're on your feet again, you've survived. A partial success, and the GM can negotiate with you on behalf of death in order for you to be able to bribe your way back.
Nice, I like that.
So for there will be consequences. Your character may be irrevocably changed, but you're not dead.
Can anybody else think of some interesting mechanics vis-a-vis character death that are out there in the various games that are out there?
Most of the ones I know are more house rule kind of things. If you've ever seen the Kickstarter-backed World's Worst Dungeon Crawl from Dungeon Bastard, one of the characters in there was much lower level than the other characters, but had I want to say it was a ring of reincarnation, and had a list of different stuff. So, die one turn, roll. What does he come back as? Kobold. Dies. What does she come back as? And it just went a flump. Well, it wasn't a flump because flumps are copyrighted by Wizards of the Coast, and they're not open game license. But you get the idea.
Well, I think, here's where I want to take it and kind of bring it back around to find out, how the guests feel about character death in general. And I'm going to start us out with some thoughts from me. I think death, and I always like to say that I'm a guy where story is really important to me. I like telling my character story or seeing how the character changes over time. And I think death is actually, for me, part of that journey. It's a thing I always kind of wonder, like, where that character will end up. And I have a lot of great characters who I look back on and I'm like, I'm really glad that they didn't die. I'm glad that they survived. I'm glad that they achieved their goals, and I'm glad that they're still, in my memory, out there still somewhere trying to save the world. But at the same time, I think there's some really good things, there's some really good tales to be told where characters die, where their deaths, meaningful and random, both, contribute to the experience. For me, it's all about the experience of the game. And if I have a good time, even if my character gets offed by a bad roll, or if he gets offed because I made a conscious decision, for me, that's really where it lies, is as long as it's fun, as long as I'm having a good time, it still serves the purpose. What about you, Nathan? What's your general thoughts on character death?
Yeah, I think I'm much the same in that regard. Death for me isn't so important as itself as it is representative of the potential risk of consequences. I don't necessarily care if there's no death specifically in a game, just so long as the characters can suffer consequences because of their choices, because of the situations they find themselves in.
Now, that being said, if I ran a game of Shadows Angelus, you would know ahead of time that your character can certainly die.
Oh yes, yeah. I've got nothing against horror style games, and and in those, major threat to life and limb and beyond, part and parcel.
Well, here's an important thing. I think I talked to a guy at a convention about this once, and the decision what we came down to was the stories you tell after the game, right? And he says, for him, it's a lot more fun to tell the story of, hey, do you remember that time we almost died? That was his view on it. Was it far more often that was the more fun story to say afterward than remember that time we all got totally senselessly killed. But I think there's it depends on the group, because I certainly have a lot of great stories about both.
Yeah, there's always a fondness for telling stories about just snatching victory from the jaws of defeat,
or vice versa.
There's also fun in telling the other side of it, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. That moment when you think you've won everything, and then you just screw up royally. One of the most fun campaigns I actually had was, and I've talked about this campaign before, I really want to do it again in a way, but it was run by that same guy, Ray, may he rest in peace, who ran the local gaming store. And it was a Thieves Guild campaign in Waterdeep. We were trying to establish a Thieves Guild in Waterdeep. And there are no Thieves Guilds for a reason. And we kept finding out why. And it wasn't just because of the fact that we were like the Three Stooges of Thieves Guilds. We were so
wise guy, eh?
We were so bad at being thieves. It was hilarious. But the thing is, and we dropped like flies. We all had like 5 or 6 characters at any one time, just because we kept having to remake them to keep a buffer up so we could keep jumping back into the game. It's like, oh, hey, we failed on this. Let's grab the other guy from the guild hall. And it was a lot of fun, even though we were just trashing character sheets left and right, because again, that was the expectation, and we got ourselves into those messes. We did it to ourselves. We were dumbasses.
What about you, Lee? What's your thoughts on it.
I just have to say to Daryl's comment, the first thing that popped into my mind was from the Gamers 2. We used the pile of dead bards for cover. Character death to me, especially since I GM more than I play, character death, as long as my players are having fun, we're all having fun, we're all having a good time, we're all laughing about it, or it brings up an emotional story that we can talk about later on, like the character at the end of Sundered Skies campaign who sacrificed himself to save the world, The rest of the party tried to stop him, and he literally fought them off to sacrifice himself to save the world. Those are amazing to me. That's when character death is awesome.
Yes.
When it's not expected, it's not planned, and it's just senseless, and because of a bad die roll, that's not so awesome to me, and I try to avoid that in my games. I try not to be the person who rolls everything behind the Game Master screen and fudges every roll just to make sure the players come out on top, but I'm also not the guy who's willing to pull his punches, especially when my players do something stupid.
Yeah, but you can certainly understand how some people could enjoy, the random death as a threat.
And as long as that is a valid threat, and as long as the players are aware of it, I completely see that as a valid survival mechanism for the characters, to drive the characters to understand that is a legitimate threat for their characters in the game.
Well, let me throw another thing out there for you, because character death, I think, is, and we've kind of talked around this issue a little bit more, because we talked about the need for communication, which is not my strong suit tonight, unfortunately. We've talked about the need for communication, about expectations and things like that. I'm going to go a step further on this and say I think that when it comes to character death, this is, for me, I think, it's a true test of trust between the group and the game master. I think there's very few things that push that boundary quite as much as how you and your group handle it when a character dies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that.
I agree with that.
I mean, I've had players who, God forbid, if their character got a paper cut, they were whining and crying until the end of the following session, But then I've got other players who, the fact that their character died, they were like, oh, that was cool, it was great for the story, hey, I'll just make up a new character for the next session, and they don't have a big issue with it, even if they were really attached to the character.
Well, again, I want to tell a quick story. I was playing in D&D with a friend of mine who we ended up playing for over a year, but it was probably like the third session, right? And I didn't know him very well. But in the third session, my character got killed. And I was having so much fun in that game. It was just, I enjoyed my character. I enjoyed the story behind her. I was really, really excited to see where things would go. And all of a sudden she gets killed, right? And because I didn't know the guys very well, like we weren't yet friends, we were just still gaming together, as acquaintances. It was really awkward for me because I was like, I just sort of started packing up my dice, and I didn't, I gotta admit, I almost shed a tear. I was so invested in that character. I was really, I was like, gosh, man, this really sucks. And, I was kind of moping around a little bit. And the GM's like, dude, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I tried to be a good player and be like, no, it's fine. I just, I need a moment here. And, that changed once we did become friends, once I did really have a lot more trust in that game master and a better understanding of, how the game and the campaign and the group, went together. The next time I got killed was way more fun. I did only die twice in that game, but yeah, the next time I got killed, I was like, okay, yeah, because the trust was there, right? The bond was there. That's all I'm saying about that.
That's definitely an issue. I mean, like, I can understand that, especially in an awkward situation where you don't know the people very well. Unlike a convention game where everyone's there to have a good time, and you know that the story is going to be 4 hours long, and then it's going to be done, and you're never going to play that character again, and possibly you may never play with those people again. it's definitely a different mindset than, like my first LARP character that passed, that permanently died. I'd been playing the same character for 10 years.
Wow.
Like once a month, up in the mountains with my friends. Beating on your friends with foam-covered plumbing is definitely what I would consider stress relief. But it's when that character that I've been playing for 10 years passed away permanently. I drew the black bead from the bag, as they call from the system, and was permanently gone. I didn't know what to do at that point. We were 6 hours into a weekend-long LARP in the mountains, and my character just died permanently, and it was extremely emotional, especially when all of my in-game friends decided that they were going to hold a funeral for the character, and they let me, as a ghost, quote unquote, because when in the system, if you wear a white headband, you're not there. Nobody interacts with you. But they let me go and watch the ceremony that they did. And it was just extremely emotional, extremely awesome. But it did take, like, me sitting there for an hour going, holy crap, now I don't know what to do. My character's dead. The same character I've been playing for 10 years.
What about you, Daryl or Nathan? You guys want to jump in with anything?
I've obviously having not played as frequently as I've GM'd, I've got a lot fewer individual character experiences over the years to draw from. But I think the first and the most memorable character death I've had was actually my decision, rather than it's a character in a campaign that ended up running for nearly 7 years. Fantasy setting loosely based on Advanced Fighting Fantasy. We ended up blowing up Black Sand at one point. The character that I was playing gave his life to let the rest of the group escape an otherwise untenable situation. This tiny little eccentric gnome alchemist who was dabbling in, making potions in bread, because potion bottles were too fragile. Never got to finish his research. Never got to carry on with the ideas. But he'd been seriously injured by a misfiring firearm, a few minutes before. Got massive ogre-like anthropomorphized rhinos lumbering through, halberds and plate armor and natural horns. And he lets the rest of the group escape while he brings out his alchemy kit. One of them picks him up, and he just looks at one of them, pokes his glasses up, and says, "Be with you in a moment," and then explodes.
Was he all out of baguettes?
Like I said, hadn't had a chance to carry on with that research. So
now I want to play that guy. Potions and bread. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What do you think, Daryl, about trust and all that? Do you think that's or I'm sorry, Nathan, did you have more? I'm sorry.
That was it, but it was it was a GM that I played with a lot, and I trusted him not to throw it up randomly, not to make the sacrifice meaningless, because that's just as important. If you're choosing to sacrifice a character, if you're choosing to let the character die, then it's almost as bad to have the character die for nothing.
Oh yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would take away an awful lot of the awesomeness from it if you end up meaning nothing in the end. Yeah, good point. Very good point.
Yeah, that's something as a DM that I would make sure to do, is if you do have a moment like that where a player chooses to sacrifice the character they've been playing for a long time in order to accomplish some goal, that's one of those cases which fudge the dice, screw the dice. They got away with it. They may not be able to get away clean, but if my character sacrifices himself for the rest of the party, then the rest of the party should be able to at least get a second chance to escape.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
And that goes back to that trust. Whenever you're doing something like that, you're sacrificing your character. You are putting trust in whoever's running the game to take that sacrifice into account in a story sense, and make sure that it gets reflected properly.
Very, very good point. So, what else can we say about character death at this point? I think we may have kind of gone almost all the way through it.
I actually had a question for you guys that kind of came up as we were talking. And this is something that actually someone said to me earlier, and it just popped into my head again. But when we were talking about character deaths, this came up actually when we were talking about the new edition of D&D that just got announced recently, just before we recorded, where someone was talking about video game death compared to role-playing game death, and how death in a video game in this point in time isn't, oh crap, I've now got to start over, where's that long code that I wrote down from the old 8-bit days, to, oh crap, I just have to go back to the last checkpoint and try this again.
Well,
and it's more of it's not as big of a setback.
This guy's never played Demon Souls.
Yeah. But the question I had was, do you guys think that with the younger generation coming in and starting to pick up role-playing games, that sort of expectation of death being just a minor setback is something that's going to affect tabletop games? And is it something we should be taking into account whenever we're running games for newer players?
I think it's probably going to be something that affects some of the players that are coming in on an individual basis, but I don't think it's something that, like, the industry as a whole needs to worry about for, changing systems so that they're more, kinder and friendlier, or at least resettable. I don't think that's that much of an issue, in my opinion. It also depends on the setting, though.
I think that's the kind of situation where having a kind of state of down but not out, D&D 4 is a good example of that, where there's a significant gap between the point where you're down and not able to continue fighting and the point where you're dead. There's a big gap between that, between those two states. So you could be taken out of the fight and someone's got to come along and bring you back into it, but you're not actually dead.
Well, that's actually a really great point, and I want to address that because, to me, from a mechanical point of view, from a verisimilitude point of view, right, it comes to a question of, is this a thing that is known in the world? Is this very obvious that you're alive or dead when you're down at that point? Because it's important to me, and I'll tell you why. I was playing in a game where a lot of us did get killed, actually the one I just got done talking about. And the GM was very clear on this. He said, if you are in negative hit points but not dead, monsters know that. They're not just going to ignore you when you're between -1 to 0. They're going to coup de grace you because they don't want you getting back up, right? And this was his particular style, which I really got into and I dug it. I liked that style. And it rubbed me the wrong way when I played in another guy's group where we ran into some guardian skeletons of this wizard's tower, who by all rights, should be pretty, implacable. I just had this image in my head of a relentless, guy who was going to try and kill me. And the DM, specifically, as soon as somebody went to -1, those skeletons would pick a different target.
That's actually how I run mine, depending on the situation, is I don't go after characters that are fallen, but I don't do it for a fluffy bunny reason. It's because it makes sense to me in that, okay, this guy's down. He's out. I don't know if he's dead or alive. I don't have time to check if he's breathing or check his pulse, but this other guy over here still has a sword and he's standing up. I'm going after that guy, unless it's a very intelligent NPC or something, or someone who would be able to tell, like a cleric or something like that. I might do it differently, but
and I'm not saying
it depends on the enemy I'm running.
I'm not saying either way is right or wrong. I'm just pointing out that these were different approaches.
Yeah. And for the record, in a lot of the rule books, they will, for 4th edition D&D, they've actually explained most monsters won't do a coup de grace for kind of the reasons I was talking about. They're more focused on the immediate threats than the ones that are on the ground.
It certainly changes the way I approach a fight in both of those.
Yeah.
I approach fights very differently.
I can definitely see how it would. That kind of information is something that on a social contract level, the player and the game master, the players and the game master need to know and be clear about ahead of time to make sure that, they understand that, okay, in this situation, basically I'm in a lot of trouble, or in this situation,
right.
Well, at least he's going to move on to another target.
And like what Daryl was saying about the monster, just there's another immediate threat. Yeah, I can totally see that if it's a thinking sentient being, right? But I was trying to imagine a wizard protecting his tower with these, skeletons, and what the orders he would give those skeletons would be. And in my head, the orders he would give is kill intruders, not seriously injure them until they fall over. Yeah.
Well, you might get a similar situation with monsters that are ravenously hungry, that are going to eat you. They're going to carry on biting and clawing at you because they're trying to eat you, and just because you've stopped moving, that just makes it easier for them.
Yeah, I made clear with that whenever I threw ghouls into a 4th edition game. Yeah, these guys are going to go for you when you drop.
But anyway, like I say, it has to do with mechanics and verisimilitude and whether or not those things are, known in the world. Like if it's not obvious, if you could say as a GM, for example, and some books may even explain this, that when you're at -1 to 0, it's indistinguishable from being dead. It may be.
It's something that comes across in a number of computer games, actually. The Gears of War series on the Xbox 360 all had a similar kind of down but not out situation. You'd be down, you could crawl around, you're bleeding out. You've done only a limited time before you're just outright dead. But there's a chance for your teammates to come and revive you. But there's also a chance for your enemies to come and stomp on your face. And it becomes an extra level of consideration, an extra level of the game to try and help your teammates that are injured, the teammates that are sprawled on the floor and can't defend themselves, as well as providing that extra gap between I can't fight anymore and I'm dead and I can't play anymore.
Well, I think my takeaway from all this is that there's a lot of different ways to have fun with gaming, and some of them involve, death being an important risk, and some of them involve death being just sort of a stop on the way to the next, encounter.
It really does, on a case-by-case basis, depending on the game that's being run, the genre that it's in, the players and whether they know and, like you said, trust the game master, and whether he knows them or not. And all of that makes a huge difference on how character death is going to be approached in an individual game.
I actually wanted to ask some advice from you guys, especially from Ross, because he's been taking the pro-killing characters stance a lot. But here's the thing. I am, in many ways, a cream puff when it comes to that. I'll go out and say I'm a wuss as a DM. I don't like killing characters if I can at all help it, unless they bring it upon themselves. If they just do something completely stupid, yeah, you did it yourself. But I also kind of want to run some of these old school. I've been looking through a while back on D&D Classics. They had the Temple of Elemental Evil for free, so I got that PDF, and I've been going through it, and I've been trying to convert it to next, and now that the new edition's finally going to be coming out, I want to run this, except for I cannot be that kind of DM and run the Temple of Elemental Evil. If I am that kind of DM, I'm not really running the module.
Hey, Daryl?
Yes?
I stick my head in the demon's mouth. What happens?
Oh, that one I did.
That's Tomb of Horrors.
Yeah, I ran Tomb of Horrors, and I managed to get a group of people who had never heard of it before to jump in the demon's mouth 3 times.
I can see getting the whole party to do it once, but getting the whole party to do it 3 times, that's impressive. That really is.
It was a different one each time, and none of them ever knew what happened to the ones that went away.
Maybe this time it'll work.
Yeah. So they thought maybe, okay, if I jump through this time, I'm going to end up in that room where they're at. So that's kind of what happened. But
what about the head of Vecna?
I love that story. Love that story.
Nathan, are you familiar with the head of Vecna story?
I'm not familiar with it, but I know where it's going.
Okay.
Oh, please, someone please tell this story. I'm not capable
Lee,
of it.
why don't you do the honors?
Okay, so apparently there was a game master who had 2 different groups that were playing under him, and one PC group decided that they wanted to take out the other group. So they came up with this idea. You know what the hand of Vecna and the eye of Vecna are, right, Nathan?
Yes.
And you only gain the power from them by removing your hand and attaching the hand, or removing your eye and attaching the eye. Well, this group found that they started spreading this rumor that the head of Vecna was in a local dungeon that was in the area somewhere, and they started spreading the rumor. Well, they didn't tell the druid in their party, so the druid, wanting to feel more important for the rest of the party, goes on this quest by himself and finds the head of Vecna, takes it out into the wood, manages to summon an animal and have it decapitate his head, basically bite his head off. And then
he reasons that if he puts Vecna's head on his neck,
exactly, it's just like the hand of Vecna. So the whole team goes whoops, and so they reset the whole thing. They reset all the traps that they set and everything like that. They actually realized, oh wait, this head that we're using doesn't have a missing eye, and Vecna's missing an eye. So they pop the eye out, they reset the whole thing, and then eventually the other group goes in, and they get into a big fight about who's going to be the person who gets their head removed, and it ends up killing like half the party amongst themselves, only
who's
to find
be the
out
first one to put the head of Vecna on.
exactly, only to find out that that the entire thing was set up by the other group of PCs as a trap for them.
Yeah, that's a classic story. I love that one. But the reason why I brought up my, cream puff DM style is I'm wanting to run these old school adventures, but I'm kind of squeamish about killing off characters because I'm used to these really story and narrative driven games. What advice would you guys give me if I want to get over that?
I would definitely say discuss it with the group, and just say, kind of tell them what you told us. I want to run a game in this particular style.
Yeah, that's, you definitely want to talk about it with your players, especially if they're used to your gaming style and you're going to change it up on them. Or, run a couple of sessions of paranoia and let them kill each other off and get used to the fact that characters die. Then you can start running and adding in character death.
The other thing I might suggest once you're actually in the game is encourage them to recruit, NPCs. Have them with NPCs around, because the NPCs provide you with the opportunity to redshirt them to prove how dangerous the situation is, and B provides you with a ready supply of backup characters in case the main ones die.
Running a Hackmaster.
Ooh.
Dungeon Crawl Classics actually encourages players to hire henchmen so that you do have a backup first level character to bring in if
they're
your
your
primary
proteges.
dies. Yep,
You could
exactly.
spend money on training them and stuff.
And you can name them Norbert.
Black Lotus the 15th.
Yes.
All right.
So basically your advice is to get over it.
So I think we're just about done with the topic of the night, so we're just going to ask you guys for like a couple sentences as a final thoughts, and then we'll let you talk about your latest things. Daryl, what are your final thoughts on character death?
Well, like I said, it really depends on the tone of the game, what you're trying to do. If it can be fun to play, I know for a fact it can be fun to play in type of games where your characters are dying completely, but you have to be aware that it's going to happen, and you have to be prepared for it. And it has to be the type of game where the story evolves from the actions rather than be a narrative story. It's kind of hard to keep a cohesive narrative of these, like a TV show or something like that. You don't replace an entire cast on a TV show every single week unless you're Game of Thrones.
And then you only replace half of them, so.
Or you recast the mountain 4 times.
All right. Nathan, what are your final thoughts on character death?
I think so long as everyone's on the same page regarding how deadly a campaign is, how likely death is, and what situations is going to cause it when you go into the game, there's no problem with any particular approach. Just so long as everybody knows what the expectation is. You don't want someone wandering into a superhero game and expecting Watchmen instead of Super Friends.
Because both of those styles of game can be fun. All right.
Absolutely.
And this is a reminder for me to link to the Robot Chicken episode where they have the funeral for the comic book characters on a recent episode.
Yes.
And the guy just stands up and is like, "Why are we doing this? I've come back 5 times."
Yeah. Robot Chicken is awesome.
Yes.
Lee, what are your final thoughts?
It's just dependent on the game master, the players, their social contract, and the game itself. If you're playing something along the lines of Hackmaster or, DCC or even Paranoia, death is something that's to be expected. And if your players don't anticipate that and they think that it's going to be, the 4-color, or fantasy with resurrection spells, being common. It's just a matter of that social contract. Everything in gaming pretty much comes down to the social contract, understanding what everyone is supposed to be doing and where they're supposed to be socially. And
Well, one thing we didn't actually go into was like the social consequences of character death. Because there's a lot of, that's a volatile thing, man. That can break up a character, that could break up a group, that could cause someone to just walk out.
Especially if it's player on player created.
Oh God, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I've had a couple of
thing.
I've had a couple of game groups break up because one player gets pissed off at another player outside a game, and
Kills
so
him in his
they do
sleep.
everything, kills their character in their sleep, and then it just starts a cascading downward spiral that ends up breaking the game up within a session or two.
That was my
I'm
Star
naming
Wars
my
example
next
earlier.
character the anti-Brian. Sorry, what'd you say?
There was my Star Wars example earlier. And
Yeah.
a group that just self-destructed.
Yeah. So it's a volatile thing. So from a social point of view, I think that's something we all should also keep in mind.
Yes.
Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's quite all right. It's it all comes down to that understanding and trust between the players and the game master. Because and to be honest with you, the game master is a player too. So you just need to understand that it's the players understanding how things are going to be and what's expected for that campaign before you even start with your first session.
As for me, I happen to be the type of GM where I am perfectly fine if people think that I am not a killer GM. If they say that, well, we know we're going to play with Ross, and that means we're probably going to live through the campaign, I'm okay with that. Right? That being said, I definitely understand the appeal of games where death is random and can come at any time. I understand the appeal of games where death doesn't even need to happen. I understand the appeal of games where you just have some kind of meaningful risk, like Nathan was talking about, and I'm fine with that too. I like the idea of a meaningful risk because to me that's a really important part of like the character's arc and in the character story. But coming from a background of playing an awful lot of convention games, sometimes I don't even need that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes I don't even need that.
And being a game master for more or less mostly game mastering at conventions, I'm not afraid to kill players. I had a TPK at Genghis Khan a couple of years ago in a Necessary Evil game when I didn't realize that having a bunch of wildcard NPCs plus a group of minion drones that shot big lasers at the party was going to be that much of a consequence, but it happens.
I had a group I was running through Pathfinder very recently, and I set up a situation where it was very obvious that what was supposed to happen is they were supposed to run away, right? Like I had the spirit guide that had been telling them about their adventure. He showed up and he's like, "It's time for you to run," and was holding off the bad guys. And I was explaining how they were building up more and more forces, and it was just going to escalate larger and larger. I was building up this main thing that they were supposed to run away from. And I say supposed to because they didn't. Of course they didn't. And to their credit, they almost won. They went back and they fought some werewolves, and they didn't have the silver weapons, so they didn't win, but they came really close. They almost won, and I had to stop for a second. I said, guys, I think to me, what makes the most sense here is a TPK, and everybody agreed that was what made the most sense. But I went home and I thought about it, and I was like, what would be cooler though is if they took them captive, because
yes.
The werewolves want more werewolves, and there's no reason why, I couldn't say, well, we're keeping you alive only so we can turn you chaotic evil and turn you into a lycanthrope so that we will grow more powerful. I mean, that stands to reason too, right? So having thought about it overnight, I came back the next day and I said, okay, guys, here's what happens. You wake up in a cage, and the bad guy explained why, he didn't just kill them because they had nearly won, and he wants guys that strong on his side. Right?
Yep.
And actually it worked out. It was a twist in the story that everybody enjoyed. there was still a consequence. They lost all of their golden magic items that they'd built. Like, I specifically took the silver sword that they'd found, the silver magic sword that they'd spent like the whole last adventure getting. I specifically took it, like broke it right in front of them. I was like, here's your, I was making it clear, this is your consequence for dying, quote unquote, is, you lose this.
I'd almost rather have died.
Well, it was just, it wasn't a concept kill, because the magic sword wasn't part of their concept. It was something they'd found. But it was a consequence, and I felt like everybody won in that instance. And
I will say, I got another story. I am the Green Puff DM unless it comes to, I run Temple of Elemental, I run Tomb of Horrors. I'm expecting to trash character sheets. I run Paranoia. I'm trashing characters. That's just the territory with those. You know that going in. Everyone does. It's kind of the point.
If you don't, you need to read the cover of the book before you, the back cover of the book before you play.
Yeah. But there was one time where I was in a campaign that was a long, ongoing story, big, huge story arc where I had no problems whatsoever with killing this one guy. Because here's what they did. You walk into a 30-foot by 30-foot room. 3 feet off the ground and every 5 feet across in this room are little holes that are about 3 inches by 3 inches. The door behind you locks. It is 5 foot by 5 foot tiles on the floor. And there's a door directly across from you. There's nothing else in the room. I could not have made it more obvious if I put a neon sign in the middle of the room that said, "This is a trap." So this one goes, okay, I'm going to start investigating the holes. I'm going to investigate this. And one guy goes, I'm bored. I'm going to see what's in the next room. And opens the door and crossbows crisscross. I had no problems whatsoever killing someone that stupid.
I've got a similar story. I was running a Rollmaster of all things, 3 hours to make a character, first combat it dies. And a friend of mine was playing this barbarian type character. I think he was a greater orc, and they assault this tower that has these creatures in it, and they're humanoid creatures. And so they bust in the door. They see stairs going down into the basement. The rest of the tower's ruined. So he charges down the basement. He sees a door at the end of the hall. He lets out a battle cry, throws his two-handed axe down the hall, burying it into the door, runs up, rips it out, kicks the door open, and took a crossbow bolt to the left eye. No problems with that at all.
All right. Well, the Imperial Guard is stopping by, and Mac, the bartender, is giving me that look that says it's time to wrap things up. So, Mr. Dowdell, why don't you tell us all about your latest thing and where we can find out more about you on the interwebs?
Right. I am at present working on the 3rd edition of Mutant Chronicles.
Which is awesome.
Nice.
I've been brought on fairly recently and churning out words like there's no tomorrow. Fleshing out and cleaning up and expanding on the background of a game that hasn't really seen the light in 20-odd years.
Because it wasn't that long ago you guys kickstarted that,
yes,
right?
I still have all of my original books.
The Kickstarter was colossally successful. And it ended up on something like 10 to 15 times the initial amount that was asked for. Basically enough to fund the entire product line. It's shaping up really nicely. We've got a closed beta going on at the moment. There's an open beta available for free through DriveThruRPG. It's a slightly older version of the rules, but not that much has changed since it was put up there. And it's a really good, really fun adventure to introduce people new to the setting.
Don't you have some 40k stuff also coming out? Recently?
No, I haven't actually done anything for 40k in a couple of years. Last thing I did for 40k was Ark of Lost Souls and Hammer of the Emperor.
Hammer of the Emperor. Well, we worked on that one together, actually. So,
unfortunately, I didn't get as much done on that one as I would have liked, but all came at a rather awkward time.
All I'll say is it's a damn shame that they don't have you doing more 40k stuff, because you're really good at it.
But Mutant Chronicles has got my attention at the moment, and I'm looking forward to seeing it as it develops.
Awesome.
We've got a lot of good people working on it.
Do you have a personal website?
I did do. Fortunately, it's not up at the moment. I I've changed computers a couple of times since then. I haven't got the original files available. I'm
All right.
still working on getting it back up and running.
Where can we find Mutant Chronicles then?
Mutant Chronicles can be found it can be found through the Modifius website. It's the company that's running it.
Okay.
They've got information on that through their Kickstarter, and they also have a Twitter feed and a Facebook page, as basically everybody does these days.
Now, before you were a dealer of cards, and before you were a writer of game stuff, were you not also responsible for some fairly high security stuff for Her Majesty's government?
Yes, for a number of years. It's about 6.5 years in all. I built nuclear weapons for a living.
Oh, yes. I knew I needed to get him to say that on the air.
Well, I did not.
Thank you,
Wow.
Nathan. I'm sorry to ambush you like
No,
that.
no,
but
that's
just,
fine,
I
that's fine.
needed
That's the
to...
second person that's been on the podcast that probably has a higher security clearance than I did.
All right. So, Lee, what's your latest thing, and where can we find out about you?
I don't have a personal webpage yet, but Gabos Forge Games will be coming up as my projects progress. I'm very close to finishing up the last bit that I need to send to Pinnacle Games for approval for a license to do Savage Worlds projects. And I'm in negotiations with another company to reproduce their D20 setting into a Savage Worlds setting. But that's still on the down low a little bit, hush-hush. So other than that, you can follow me on Twitter, and it is @PunisherWar is my Twitter feed. Otherwise, you can find me on Facebook under my name. So
Super cool. Well,
I will be at Gen Con running AMP Year 1 for Third Eye Games, as that will be launching there, and I was one of the primary playtesters for the system.
Nice. Before we go to the end, I do want to also point out, I actually have some 40K news for the listeners.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that, Ross.
First of all, Shield of Humanity, which is the only war book I worked on, is now out. It's on shelves. You may see it. I'm excited about Shield of Humanity. It was pretty awesome. It's probably it's most likely the last thing I've ever worked on for the RPG. It like Nathan, I think, that might be the last thing I've worked on in a couple of years, for the RPG, but it's pretty awesome. And what I have been working on also is a thing called Regicide. Regicide is a Warhammer 40K, chess-based game. I like to say it's, basically turn-based strategy with a chess-like engine. So don't think of it as just battle chess. It's going to be way more awesome than that. And
so I think you said before the show compared it to XCOM.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean it's not obviously not as freeform as XCOM because there is a chess base to it. And people who enjoy chess and who enjoy turn-based strategy and who enjoy 40K are going to like all of it. I am actually the lead writer, so I'm doing the story on it and the characters, and it's going to be the single-player campaign is all about the Blood Angels. So I think 40K fans will really enjoy that.
And definitely check out the trailer. We've got it linked in the show notes.
That's right.
Ross wrote the dialogue on that, and it is impressive.
It's Warhammer40kchess.com, I think.
I am looking forward to that.
Yeah, Warhammer40kchess.com, I think, is the website for that. So, cool. All right. On behalf of Daryl and myself, we want to say thank you very much for being on the show with us tonight. Nathan, Lee.
No problems.
No problem.
Anytime.
It was a real pleasure. We'll have to have you guys back on in the future.
Would love to.
Yep.
All right. And in the meantime, try not to have your characters get killed.
And for the record, if your character does die, in my opinion, it is okay to cry.
Unfortunately, since I GM and don't actually get to play very often, most of my characters die because they're NPCs.
Aww. I don't feel sad for NPCs.
Given that
at
I'm
least not most of the time.
playtesting Mutant Chronicles at the moment, most of my NPCs are undead anyway.
Good point. Very good
Very
point,
good.
sir.
All right. Well, until next time, thank you guys again, and may all your hits be crits.
Have you been looking for a dark fantasy RPG setting? Are you interested in seeing a new take on the action horror genre? Then you should check out Accursed. Accursed is a setting for the Savage Worlds RPG created by me, Ross Watson, and my good friends Jason Marker and John Dunn. It is a world where the heroes are monsters who fight for redemption against the witches who have conquered their land. To find out more about Accursed, search for Accursed on drivethrurpg.com. Accursed is now on sale there and in many other fine retailers for gaming PDFs. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy Accursed.
That about wraps things up for this week. We only had one comment since the last episode. Yeah, that's kind of going to happen when I clear out the queue like I did last week, and then I'm recording this before I'm done editing the episode. So, yeah. Anyway, we got a comment from Crichton Brown on Facebook who said, "You guys ever think of making it up to Denton for ReaperCon? Even if you don't, just coming to the store is cool to see the figures gallery in the back." Now, I absolutely love Reaper. They make really high quality minis and they just look amazing, great sculpts and everything, but I don't think I own a single one of their products because you have to paint them and I can't paint. I've got some kind of mental block. I just cannot paint miniatures. I don't know why. Wait, no, that is a lie. That is a lie. I do own one thing. I've got an Illithid figure. You know, looks like a mind flayer, but it's not a mind flayer because that would be trademark violation. But, it's an Illithid that they had in part of their pre-paint line that they had for going for a while. So I've got one of those. And like I said, they're amazing things. I just can't paint. I'll buy a crap load of them if someone wants to paint them for me. But I can't play with unpainted minis and I can't paint myself, so I don't get a lot of Reaper stuff. However, if it is something you're interested in, check them out. Their Bones line is great, amazing sculpts, really affordable. As far as the convention itself, I'm most likely not going to be able to go at least this year because I'm out of pocket on every convention I go to. I have to pay for everything when I go to these conventions, and right now I am just laser focused on Gen Con. Making sure my finances work out for that, and come hell or high water, I'm going to make it to Gen Con. Anything else before that, I can't do financially. Anything after that, I'm worrying about that after Gen Con. But as soon as that's over with, I'm going to start looking at some other cons and start checking out the finances for that. But Ross, on the other hand, if you'd like to get him out there, the best way, if you have a local gaming convention, you want to get Ross to it, email the convention organizers and tell them you would like Ross there as a guest. Send them to his website, therosswatson.com, and have him check out his resume. He's an amazing guest, great at panels, great at running games. Definitely, if you want to get him at a convention, that's the best way to do it. Get the convention to invite him as a guest. So, speaking of Ross, I'd like to once again remind you about his GoFundMe for him, Sean Patrick Fannin, and Corinne Siebold, so they can move to what's kind of becoming a gaming mecca. Brian Patterson from the D20 Monkey, he's also moving out to Denver as well recently, plus all the game stores and gamers and conventions they have already had there. It's turning into kind of a thing now, but if you want to help them on their move to Denver and get some great rewards for yourself in the process, check them out at gofundme.com/bigdenveradventure. And if you'd like to support the podcast, you can rate us on iTunes, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, or visit our website at gamerstavern.org. There you can read blog posts, comment on our episodes, and check out our store and visit our sponsors. This podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 license. Music for One Degree of Separation is copyright Nick Jaworski, all rights reserved, used with permission. Music for Accursed is Artemis by Asmodeva, used under a Creative Commons Attribution 2.5 license. Until next time, the tavern is closed. 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 closed, 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 closed.